Welcome back, fellow hobbyists. Today I'll be showing you how I made a cornhole board. It is 2x3, so it is the dimensions of a tailgate size. So let's get into it, tailgate style. So like I said earlier, I used the dimensions 3 feet by 2 feet, which is tailgate size instead of the traditional 4 by 2 feet. Step 1 is to cut the wood. I cut a bunch of varying sizes. I used 1x4 just pine wood here. For the frame, you need 4 that are 36 inches, 4 that are 24 inches, and the inside I used 2x2s, which I need 8 3-inch pieces, 4 2 feet, and 4 1 foot. For the board top, I used 2 1/4-inch sheets of plywood, and for the legs, I used 4 8-inch pieces and 4 1x4 pieces of board. And the last miscellaneous items, I used 2 hinges, a bunch of wood screws, and some drywall putty. Here's where I put the screws in on the side. Put 3 on each side, and on the top I did 4 on the sides and 3 on the top and bottom. So now I measured out where I'm going to put the screws, and I measured out where that was going to be 3 equidistant screws from the middle of the board. And this is the side board, so this one is one of my 36-inch pieces of board. So I marked all 3 at the length they needed to go, and I needed to make sure they were going to bite into the middle of the 2x2. So I put them 3/4 of an inch up from the edge of the board. Then I drill my pilot holes so that the screws go in nicely. Now I drilled the screws into each hole. Repeat this whole step for 3 more times. Now once you have all the sides made, you can put the top layer of plywood on top. Right here I'm marking where all the screws are on the side of my board. So that way I know on top I can measure out a couple inches away from each screw so that I don't run into it from the top. So I'm doing the same thing on top again. I'm measuring how far in the board the screws need to go. And I'm measuring this time, I'm measuring 1.5 inches to ensure that I have enough space to pass the frame board and make sure I bite into that 2x2 with the screw. Marking all of these spots to put the pilot holes. Now you just drill the pilot holes, then screw in the screws, and do that for each side. Now I forgot to film this step, but these are the 8 3-inch pieces of 2x2, and I just screwed 1 screw in on each side to hold the corners together. Next, I'm measuring where the legs are going to attach to the body of the board. Here I'm measuring 3 3/4 inches in from the edge of the board, and that's just from the edge of the inside of the frame. I'm going to draw a top line to connect those 2 dots that I made. Then I'm going to measure in again on the other side. This time I'm only going 3 1/4 inches. I just felt like this is a good place to be putting the legs. But make sure you do it the same on each side. Once I got those 2 dots drawn, I just draw a line straight through, creating a penciled corner. And using that corner, I'm going to use the base of that 1x4, and I'm just going to trace it on so I know exactly where it's going to go when I screw it onto the board. And the leg is just going to attach onto this. Now I've flipped the board over so that I can mark the same rectangle on the top that I just marked on the bottom, because the screws are going to have to go in from the top here. So here I'm measuring in 4.5 inches to account for the 3/4 inches of how thick the frame is. So I'm doing that same thing, marking 2 marks and putting a line. Then I'm going to measure in from this side, mark 2 marks, put a line, and that'll create that corner again, and I can just trace the same piece of wood and I know exactly where the screws are going to go. Here I measure where I want the screws to go in to attach to the base of the leg. I wanted each screw to be at least 1/2 inch away from the edge of the 1x4 piece on the bottom. So I'm marking that on top, and I'll mark all 4 dots up on top here. Then once again, once you got all the marks on the board here, make sure you drill your pilot holes and screw in that piece of wood on the bottom. Next up, I cut the legs. I just taped them together so that I can make sure I get a flush and even cut for both legs and make sure they are both the exact same length. I cut mine to 8 inches because we have that 1x4 piece of board that they're going to attach to on the bottom. Next, to attach the legs to the base of the board, I'm going to measure in here to the midline of that 1x4 piece that we just put on. And I'm measuring the middle just so that I can center everything, and when I put the hinges on it, it's going to fold nicely. Now I'm going to do the same thing on the leg. I'm going to mark the midline, or the middle of the leg, and draw a line so that I know exactly where the middle of the leg is going to be. Now I can use those midlines that I drew and just match them up on the base of the leg there, and I'm going to feel the back of the leg and make sure that it's flush. Once I get it flush, I'm just going to trace right around the leg so I know exactly where to put it when I come back. Now that I've got it all traced, I hold the hinge up so that I can draw on the dots where I want to put the pilot holes for the screws for the hinge. Now that I've got the pilot holes in, I can screw the hinge onto the leg. Now I'm going to repeat that process to attach the leg to the board. I'm feeling the back to make sure it's flush again, trying to line up those midlines so that it's even, and I will mark the holes on the base of the board so that I can drill the pilot holes and screw on the hinge. Now make sure when you drill these pilot holes, you don't go too deep. We're only using 3/4 inch nails, so it doesn't have to be super deep, or else you're going to go all the way through the top of the board. I was only able to use my drill for that most outside screw. The drill wouldn't fit all the way up against the leg, so I had to just manually screw in the screw. Next is measuring where the hole of the board is going to be. Now from the top, I had found the midpoint of the top of the board, and then I made sure that it was 9 inches down from the top of the midpoint because the circle has to be 6 inches in diameter. And I just was using my square here to measure that my compass was 3 inches, and I can put the center of the compass on that 9-inch mark that I made and draw the outside circle. Once I finished that outside circle, I pushed the compass together just maybe 1/4 of an inch, if that, and did another circle, and this is the line that I'm going to follow when I cut out the hole. Now I'm drilling a second hole right next to the first hole I drilled so that I can fit the saw blade inside and start cutting. Now I'm using a handheld jigsaw here, but you can, if you have a 6-inch hole cutter, you can just use that as well. Now notice I'm cutting along the inside circle that I made. I'm going to have to go in and sand out the rest because this saw doesn't make the cleanest cut. And there are a few ways you could do this. You could sand it, you could file it. A file will sometimes pull away a little too much wood, so I opted to use my Dremel tool and just sand it away until I was at that 6-inch diameter hole that I drew the very first time. Next step is to get the drywall putty, and I'm using this to fill in any bumps or holes that I might have accidentally created, mainly to fill in where I drilled the screws in, and there's a little indent because the screw is a little bit below the very top of the wood. And once the drywall putty is all nice and dry, I went through with a belt sander and I evened out any edges that were a little off to make everything look nice and flush. I also went through with a vibration sander afterwards to get the more fine little bumps that I had, mostly from the drywall that I had put on. And I went through a one-time really quick on the top of the board just to kind of smooth out any imperfections in the wood. Now that the basic construction of the board is done, it is time to prime and paint. I will have a part 2 video on how to do that coming soon. Thank you all for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. Please like and subscribe. Leave a comment down below. Keep creating, keep doing, and hail to the hobbies.